because I brought you somebody really important. Let's see a show of hands who knows the name of Nathan. Okay, I have a friend son of Nathan is with the US PIRG, which is the organization that was founded by Proctor, and he is basically taking the charge for the public interest here in the terms of the right to care. I don't know how many of you had a chance to and to White House speaking about right to care recently. That's another thing that's behind the scenes. His name, the organization was not explicitly mentioned, but that is what is happening behind the scenes. So we have a lot of help, and we need a lot of help because this thing is taking momentum, and it's not just a few states here and there that is interested in a few industries here. Given Apple, which was a significant opponent for many years, have changed its heart, and we see a lot of momentum, not only in the United States, but in the European Union, in Australia, but it's all over. So please, let me just do a quick introduction. I mean, this is what I'm going to talk about history, but I'm going to let Nathan show a lot of things on a broader scale. Okay, so if you would like to take over and just go ahead.
You go. All right. Hey, everybody. I feel like I should say something about Binseng. That's really nice because he said something about me. But he just introduced himself as if everybody knew exactly. I don't even have my thing on. Is that what the? I was just talking loud. I can actually talk less. Can you guys hear? All right. Hey, so Binseng, luminary in this field, has been doing this work and raising the alarm about issues about right to repair. It is on. Yeah. This green light. And it's been a really great pleasure to get to work with Binseng on this campaign, in part because he's funny. He's really funny. So if you're gonna get to hang out with Binseng, he makes jokes, and he's got this pattern of humor. I don't know if you hang out with Binseng, you should totally hang on if you've never done it. It's like cheesy joke, melt your face, hilarious joke, and he just sneaks them in. Like you don't expect it because he has these jokes that are just like, kind of corny dad jokes, and then he'll just have a killer one and just melt your face, and it's awesome. So I'm a huge Binseng fan, but I'm just going to tell you a little bit about right to repair in the most general sense. And we're switching back and forth presentations here, so. All right, so I've clicked anywhere on the screen, and now this works. Okay, so this is a little bit about me. Binseng already introduced me, so maybe I'll be a little less, I'll stand behind here. I'll be a little less, this is stuff about me. So I've been working on right to repair for basically across all industries, with my coalition, which includes iFixit and Repair and some of the other Repair Dogs, big umbrella organization. I've written or co-written 13 reports on right to repair. It's funny that the White House didn't actually explicitly mention my organization, but it quoted my reports 6 or 7 different times in the comments from Tom Perez and other White House officials. My work's been cited all over the place, blah 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 blah. I'm super fancy and important. Okay. I just want to start by telling you a little bit like kind of how and why I got into this. And to me, it kind of goes into my organization is PIRG. We're an advocate for the public interest. We believe that somebody's got to look out for not just the public, but the public over the long term, right? So special interests have their lobbyists, and politicians are often legislating for the next election. But who's actually speaking up for our collective, the future of our people, like our health, our environment, our ability to choose our own lives. And so that's one thing that we've been doing. We do this mostly by running state level advocacy campaigns, but we also have a federal office. So that's us, we're all over the place. Americans dispose of 416,000 cell phones a day. We buy these $1,000 supercomputers. If you went back 20 years, 25 years or something, and you were explaining to somebody, in the late 90s, what an iPhone could do. It's like it's going to have GPS, it's going to be like an iPod, but like times a million, times infinity. It's going to have all this stuff, and you're just going to throw it out when the battery goes bad. Also, you're going to pay $2,400 in a payment plan over 2 years. People would think we're just crazy. And actually, the Apple iPhone is the most profitable product in the history of humankind. Apple's made $1.5 trillion in sales on that product. But yet we treat them as if they're disposable. Like, how did this happen, right? This is a lake of doom, radioactive, sulfuric acid, which is a byproduct of harvesting the rare earth metals needed for memory in our cell phones. So this is the consequence of the manufacturing of our smartphones, which we're just tossing when the battery gets bad. I think of, why don't we fix things? Why don't we just replace the battery? Why did that somehow stop? And I think you kind of have to think about the experience. You have something, it breaks and doesn't work. The first thing you do is you take it to the manufacturer, right? I mean, that's what most people do. And the manufacturer might say, oh, okay, well, actually, I can't fix this. Let me take it and recycle it. And here's a newer product you can buy. Or you might say, actually, we can fix it, but because we're the only ones who have the parts, tools, and information to do it, we're going to charge you, 3.5 arms and 4.5 legs, and good luck finding repair somewhere else. And we're also going to take 6 weeks to do it because, hey, why not? We'll ship it. We're going to ship it to the Philippines and back because it's cheaper for us. And so all of these are different things that happen when you have a monopolized, consolidated repair market. It costs more money, there's more waste, and the downtime goes way up. We actually kind of calculated this, my organization. This is one of the numbers cited by the White House. This is from a report I wrote called Repair Saves Families Big, that if consumers were to repair instead of replace their home electronics so that they got 50% more life out of them, even including the cost of the additional repairs, it would save the average household $382 a year, which is close to $50 billion in savings for American families across the US economy. And this number is even more arresting when it comes to downtime associated with farmers. We did a similar study and found that farmers could save $4.2 billion a year, and 3/4 of this savings is from reduced downtime, because when equipment goes down and you're in a critical planting or harvesting window and you can't get access to dealership service, and if you want to look John Deere dealership technician openings, you'll find thousands of these jobs. Like, they're having trouble filling these jobs. The cost is downtime. The result of downtime is lost money for farmers, right? I'll skip this. So what is happening? We've taken this message to lawmakers all over the country. We've said, listen, when you can't fix something, it ends up as waste. You end up paying through the nose. You would struggle with downtime. It ends up with electronic waste. We got to cut this out. And we over the last couple of years, we've been able to pass laws in 5 different states. The first right to repair law was actually passed by the aftermarket automobile industry in 2012, which passed on the ballot in Massachusetts by 86-14 margin. And that kind of woke up the electronics and medical and other device fields, saying, like, listen, if you can do it for cars, you can do it for everything else. And why don't we have a state bill? And so that started happening. And then in the last 2 years, we've just seen a ton of laws getting over the finish line. It took a while to convince lawmakers to tell all these manufacturers that they disagreed with them, that's pretty scary, as you might imagine, if GE and all these other companies are coming into your office. But our first one passed in New York last summer, That was quickly followed by a bill in Colorado covering powered wheelchairs. And then Colorado passed another bill concerning farm equipment, followed by Minnesota, which passed a broad right to repair bill. And just 2 weeks ago, the California governor signed right to repair in California, which is probably the strongest consumer right to repair bill we've passed. And again, we've just been making a ton of progress. So the other thing Binseng asked me to talk a little bit about was our organization's experience with medical device right to repair, right? From the beginning, like I was teasing Wayne more because he was the first treasurer of the Repair Association, which is the umbrella group fighting for right to repair. Medical has been part of the right to repair conversation from the beginning. But for me personally, I mean, I was talking a lot more often about John Deere and Apple computers than I was about Philips and GE and Medtronic. That is until March of 2020. And I started getting a lot of calls, seeing content, like seeing stuff on Justin's channel, by the way, Better Biomed there, celebrity in the room. And we started, there was a confluence of issues, right? We had decided as an organization, listen, we're gonna do everything we can to help our nation weather the COVID-19 pandemic. So we spent a lot of time, helping to, protect public health and stand up for people who were doing the hardest work of that time. And one of those groups that we were connected to were biomeds and HTMs and BMETs. And they started telling us these stories, right? Like one story was, there's travel restrictions in place. Our hospital won't let the servicers come in, or the OEM won't let the servicers travel anymore. They don't have their trainings, and so like our trainings are expiring for our training keys, and there's no new training. So all of a sudden, all our technicians are going to lose access to all the equipment. And people were like, these hospitals were like really under a ton of pressure. These people were working their butts off to keep us healthy. And so we started organizing and talking to biomeds to learn what was happening and what we could do to help. Here's just one of a couple examples from the survey that we did of more than 200 biomeds. By the way, this is ISO, in-house, HDO people, and OEM servicers took this survey. They're probably mostly multi-vendor servicers, but I don't actually know that. I didn't talk to them. I just know that that's what they said in the form. So 30% of respondents said that they had equipment in their hospital at that time which could not be used because the manufacturer was withholding some kind of service material, and 92% that they said that they had been denied access to service materials for critical healthcare equipment. And then this is the one thing I thought was really fascinating. This is the breakdown of people who said, how important is right to repair to your work? Right to repair is a top issue facing the field was 67%. And then not important was 0. So that told me that this is something people are experiencing and they have strong feelings about. And that nearly 70% of the people we talked to, which a lot of people think this number should have been a lot higher, but this is what they reported, said that they had to delay patient procedures because they could not access materials because of the limitations put in place from OEM servicing. So that's patient care, right? That's where it comes. That's where you're really talking about negatively impacting patients. So that's my overview. And Binseng, I think no, I have two more slides. The other thing that we started doing was actually we thought, okay, at least the service materials, at least the instructions, the service manuals, those should be released. We started campaigning to get the manufacturers to release those manuals, and they started doing it, right? So GE and Medtronic, and they started sharing a lot more of these materials because we put a lot of public pressure on them. This is a letter from I think it was 22 statewide elected officials. This is auditors and state treasurers who were saying, you got to release these service documents, and that was part of the political pressure that was put on manufacturers just to ease up and let people fix stuff because we were in trying times. Senator Ron Wyden introduced a bill that would have basically granted right to repair for the duration of the pandemic. And yeah. So, and then a couple other quick things is We also fought for and won a copyright exemption under section 1201 of the DMCA. This is one of those things that I could explain this, but you're not going to want me to explain this, but you can ask me about it later if you want to hear more about that. Manufacturers eased a bunch of their restrictions. The sky didn't fall, things just happen normally. And then, we've continued to do this work. We also kind of had a dust up on the idea of what is remanufacturing versus repair. That process was, posed a lot of danger for, basically servicing. If servicing gets redefined as manufacturing, then it becomes basically cost prohibitive in a lot of cases. But we were able to get 200, networks of groups, including Sodexo, and 254 hospitals to send a letter to Congress, and we were able to stall out that particular measure to find a better solution. So that's a little bit about the history of our work on right to repair, specifically on medical as well. And I think we're going to head back to Binseng now.
Thank you so much, Nathan. Thank you. Okay.
Test that to make sure it works. Yeah, there you go.
So I'm going to give you some background information, and I'm going to go over very quickly because we don't have that much time. But rest assured that you have access to these slides after the conference, and so you can use the material later and review that more at your leisure. Okay. The past was mostly mentioned by Nathan, but I'm going to give you some more specific details. So I'm going to fly over them very quickly. This has been a very, very long fight, and this is not going to end so quickly as well. So some of you may or may not remember back the day when the FDA started to talk about the new regulation for medical devices. Is when this whole thing started. It was called quality system, and FDA is still in the process of trying to harmonize the old quality system with the 1345 international standard. And this goes back quite a bit, and many things happened during that period of time. So again, I'm not going to dwell on this kind of details, but the important thing here is that the government, FDA in particular, did look into this way back in 2016, and then in 2018, the FDA actually issued a report. This report is available online, saying explicitly there is no significant safety issues for the public due to servicing by non-manufacturers. At the same year, a number of independent service organizations like Paramedics, Sodexo, Proctor, Agility, ABM, since then acquired by Proctor, and the Intermed Group got together and we formed a so-called Alliance for Quality Medical Device Servicing. We have a website. I'm going to quote some of the material from that website to you more toward the end. As mentioned, the FDA talked about reclassifying what is really remanufacturing, and this issue has not been settled yet. It's still dangling out there because the initial proposal they made was basically non-practical, non-workable, and they since then realized that, but they have not found a reasonable solution for that, so we are still waiting for it. This is the 2018 report. It's a report by the FDA to the Congress, so it was no joke here, okay? And also, the number of bills that was introduced into states that Nathan mentioned tangentially, and he will come back and talk about one of those later on. And this Copyright Office exemption, this is very, very important because pretty recently a major manufacturer filed a lawsuit against a major service company, and the service company actually won in the court. based on this exemption. And now one of the manufacturers is suing the Library of Congress, the United States Copyright Office, for this thing. So there's lots of things to do. So if you think that the Congress of the United States is confusing, there's a whole lot more. And also back in 2022, as Nathan mentioned, some manufacturers pushed the Congress to introduce a bill to clarify, redefine what is really remanufacturing, and we had to go to the battle and get this thing done. And this is the Senator Biden and Representative Clark's bill about right to repair for the period of pandemic, but it was never actually discussed and approved with the Congress. And this is the FDA draft guidance on the remanufacturing. As you can see, there is a pretty big flowchart that I only reproduced a small part of it. And my only dumb calculation about this is for a 400-bed hospital with 500 pieces of equipment, you need 3,000 hours. In other words, 1.5 FTE per year to implement this thing. So if you think that you have the extra manpower, then you can give to Nathan's friends from the farmer equipment side, so because they want to employ those guys. It's a much easier job. Hey, if your repair didn't work, okay, a few tons of wheat is not going to be collected, but the patient's not going to die. Okay, so let's be realistic comparing the consequences here. Okay, cybersecurity is another important issue. We are all facing it one way or another. And there is a consideration called privileged access in this guidance document that FDA is talking about, but has not issued final one. And we have some significant concerns because, in my view, this is equivalent to that little friend of mine called 007. He has a license to kill. So if manufacturers are given this privileged access and they can hold on to the privileged access and say, hey, I'm going to give this only to my people and not anyone other, then it's a license. It's a license to kill. Okay. That Library of Congress exemption hopefully will ease this a little bit, but still it's not going to resolve all the problems because you could actually install a subassembly or PCB, etc., into a piece of equipment, and the piece of equipment will still refuse to work because you don't have access to the code that will allow you to readjust the system, recognize each component of the system, and calibrate whatever you installed, and still cannot make the piece of machine work, although it's a perfectly legitimate piece of equipment or part. So that's the copyright thing that I mentioned. Okay. So this is something that allegedly some lawyers are interpreting that this is only applying for the owner of the equipment and not for third parties. But the owner of the equipment can give that code, access code, to the service companies that they choose. So this is still being debated and still in the works out there. Okay. So software vendors cannot sell software that do that. It's another limit. Excuse me. Okay, present, where we are now. Cybersecurity is the main issue, is still in debate in the Congress. This Senator Warner from Virginia has a white paper about it, but we really don't know what is going to happen because the Congress, as you know, is still recovering from the shutdown, basically for the lack of speaker. And we still are trying to see how the federal government, with so many different agencies involved, are going to resolve this issue. The concern here is not just to protect the equipment, the new equipment that the manufacturers are introducing, because the FDA has issued some guidance document for new devices. But how about the legacy devices? The stuff that you have in your hospital, many of them well over 10, 20, even 30 years. I'm going to talk about the equipment aging issue tomorrow. It's a commercial here, okay? So if you are concerned about age discrimination like me, I've always been discriminated here because they only celebrate the people under 40, right? Isn't that age discrimination? Okay, but we have equipment out there that is clearly well over 10, 20, 30 years. And what's going to happen to that equipment? My back of napkin calculation, 2.4 to 5.5 million pieces of equipment, the value of replacement value of 30 to 70 billion dollars is at stake here. How many of your hospitals have money to replace that equipment in a short period of time? Okay. Coming out of the pandemic, as you folks know, several hospitals went under, closed down, literally, especially in rural areas. Okay, not their fault. They don't have money to survive. Okay, and now you say, okay, some others are recovering. Yeah, but have they recovered enough to replace equipment in a short notice? Okay, so I don't know what's going to happen to this, but FDA is refusing to discuss this openly and trying to find a solution that's acceptable. Okay. So I think we really need to start looking into this. There are several good things that FDA is doing that is going to require the softer bill of materials, cyber devices, a lot of things is happening, but they are always looking forward. They are approving things, but not what is on the market. Okay. And the right to repair for motor vehicles, they mentioned. Okay. There are several bills currently in the Congress. Okay, it's not what happened before, but now manufacturers are trying to limit the access to the data that the cars are transmitting to the manufacturers. And this is going to be a big issue because they claim there is a cybersecurity issue, safety issue, etc., etc., and they are now willing to release it. Okay, so coming back to the alliance, as I mentioned, this was formed by the biggest independent service organizations. It's not a discrimination against others. You are welcome to join. Actually, we have several associate members who are not in-house, but they are part of the third parties that repair equipment. And we have, for example, right now, Elite Biomedical and Avanti Health Solutions that is joining us to try to get a medical device right to repair bill to be introduced to in the House of Representatives. And we have been sharing this with several representatives and their staff, and we have got pretty good warm reception, but no one has yet introduced that because of this recent thing in the Congress. So we need your help. When you go back to your respective states, talk to your representatives, say, hey, we need this going. Nothing against the individual states. For example, Colorado has this power wheelchair law. Very important, very good, very significant. However, it is limited to power wheelchairs. It's one medical device among tens of thousands of others. Okay, and also it's one state. We need a uniform law for the entire United States. We cannot just go from one state to another. If you live in the border city of some place in between states, in let's say you live in Charlotte, you can now work in South Carolina because North Carolina will allow you to do certain things, but South Carolina would not. It's too confusing. We really need, and patients go from one state to another to be cared for. So we really need to have a way to do that. So we need, by partisan support, and this is not a Democratic or Republican issue. This is a public health issue. Okay. Okay, some of you look at me and say, okay, you are old, you are going to need healthcare. Sorry, guys, you guys may need, and now some of your loved ones may need healthcare as well. Okay, so we need help. Okay, there are many state levels in, right. We are going to fight at state level, and that is where US PIRG and a few others are leading the way. The alliance is focusing at federal level because we have limited resources, and that's where we believe we have the biggest impact. So we're dividing to conquer here, and we really need permanent access to service materials. That includes software. It's not just service manuals, okay? And not during a pandemic. This has to be forever, okay? And we need to also lobby the Food and Drug Administration. They have openly told us that this is a commercial issue. This is not a public safety issue. I don't understand that. There are MDs there. If timely care of patients is not a public safety issue, I don't know why we have ambulances, emergency departments, okay? Why you need that, my friend? You don't need that. You can wait 6 hours, 10 hours, if you have a heart attack, sorry. Okay. During the pandemic, we saw firsthand that our presence was critical to help the patients there. If the ventilator stops working, you have to rush there and make that thing work. Okay. And even today, you still have your so-called critical devices in your hospital, and you have to. Okay. So, and they are still thinking about privileged access and also access to the information. The only law that only regulation FDA has is about lasers. And when we ask them, well, you have laser as a president, why not apply the same rule to the other device? Oh, that's a historical legacy thing. We cannot go back and change that. The Federal Trade Commission is one of the very active one that is trying to see this as this is a limitation to free trade in the United States. That's what our country is based on. Okay, we are a capitalist country, however, we encourage free trade because that competition is what makes us stronger and better. Okay, so quickly, what's happening in other countries? We are not the only one in the world that is having this challenge. Canada has an initiative started with the initial province. You may say, well, wait a minute, Northern Territories. Northern Territories, isn't that the place that you have more caribous than people? Yeah, but they still have people. They still want to do the right thing. And you know how long it takes in the winter for a service representative from OEM to get to the Northern Territories? Never. There is no road in the. Some of you have seen that TV series, Ice Road or something called. There's no road, literally. They just drive on ice. That's it. Okay, if you can get there. Okay. So they have to depend on themselves. Okay. And so a national initiative has been started by Canada, those different provinces, and they are having a very tough conversation here. Okay. So, but they are moving. Now, European Union, it's a little bit of, underdeveloped countries, right? People have no significant history of civilization, really, right? But in 1993, they passed a law called Medical Device Directive that regulates the sale of medical devices there. And at that time, we're talking about, what, 30 years now? They require the manufacturer to provide information, okay, details of the nature and frequency of the maintenance and calibration. 30 years ago. And we have been sitting here doing what during 30 years? Begging the manufacturers to give us this information? Okay. This law was revised in 2017. It's now called Medical Device Regulation. Has the same verbiage in its annex. So if after 30 years they decided, hey, it's still worthwhile to continue this, why we are still sitting on the fence here? Okay. However, they are now struggling with this cybersecurity issue, software keys issue, and that's what I call license to kill issue. They are now fighting in the European Union Parliament. I was there last year to participate in that discussion. It's going slowly, or as you can expect, but this is something that they are definitely very much attuned. Now, one country that is sort of surprising that we think that they are just copycats, they don't care about things. And yeah, they have a right to repair law there that says, hey, require the medical device production and trading enterprise to provide medical device maintenance repair services and carry out maintenance repair devices in use of, and then provide the preventive maintenance manual, corrective maintenance manual, software backup, fault code table, spare parts list, parts maintenance, password, and materials information necessary for maintenance repair. China. If the Chinese care for their people, why the United States does not care for the Americans? Chinese must be more valuable than Americans, right? Okay. I'm going to show you some things that the Alliance has worked out to rebut the claims made by some manufacturers out there. So you can use this information to go to talk to your senior leaders in your hospitals, service organizations, etc. Tell them, hey, look, this is not what some manufacturers are claiming. Okay, many of them say safety is the primary issue. The service provided by third parties are unsafe for patients. Of course, we have, like everybody else, certain persons and organizations that may not have safety as the top of their priority. But how many of you here have encountered something called recalls of infusion pumps? Show of hands. Never heard of that, right? Yeah. Are those things not important for the safety of patients? Why manufacturers in the last decade, according to the Congress of the United States' own report, has more recalls in the last decade than any previous 30 years? Okay, so, and also, you guys have probably plenty of stories, individual stories of manufacturers that perform services incorrectly, erroneously, even to the point of injuring a patient. So it's not one-sided, this debate. There are definitely people from both sides that need better training, better instructions, etc., etc. But in general, as I mentioned before, the FDA itself wrote a report to the Congress of the United States saying the services are high quality, safe, and effective. Okay. So this is not the general dark picture that some manufacturers painted. And as I mentioned before, waiting for off-site service technicians may impede timely patient care. This is critical. Okay. You may start screaming that my phone died, I'm going to die. Sorry, you're not going to die. But if that defibrillator is dead when you need it, my friend, you better pray very hard. All right, second one. There's no regulatory oversight. Third parties are not regulated by the FDA and thus pose serious threat to public health. Indeed, service companies are not regulated by the FDA. However, hospitals are regulated by Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which is a sister agency of the FDA, through the so-called conditions of participation. Do you know any hospital here in the United States that is not regulated by CMS? It's called voluntary, but the voluntary means something like 40+% of hospital revenue comes from Medicare, Medicaid insurance. So tell me one hospital that is not a government hospital. I'm sorry here, but the military hospitals are not covered by CMS, and the VA is not covered. Yeah, but those are government hospitals. Okay, and actually VA voluntarily gets certification from the Joint Commission. Voluntarily, they don't get the money, but they still do that. Okay, I don't know a single civilian hospital that is not accredited by CMS one way or another. Okay, and these guys then contract with service companies and say, hey, you shall perform services as required by CMS and FDA, etc. Period. Okay, they transfer the responsibility to the service companies. So in effect, they are actually controlled indirectly by CMS. And also the FDA report stated the current available objective evidence is not sufficient that would justify imposing additional different burdensome regulatory requirements at this time. So that's FDA's own conclusion. Okay. And also, as you know, just as much as me, that many OEMs also provide third-party services. They call it multi-vendor services. So what's the difference? The fact that they are regulated on the products they produce does not mean they are regulated on the products they don't produce. So let's be real here. Intellectual property. Well, if I give you the source code, that is definitely very risky. But if I give you access to the diagnostics, access to the calibration, that is not a real significant intellectual property. Again, the people, the countries that have the intention of pirating other people's intellectual property are those outside the United States. Okay, I'm not going to mention names because I'm going to be assassinated by some spies as soon as I step out of the room here. But you know which countries that are notorious with this kind of things. Okay. Cybersecurity. Again, service organizations, including the ones that are independent, as well as in-house, none of us have any particular interest of participating or helping any ransomware attacks. Ransomware attacks are for money, okay? And if the hustle stops, everybody stops. There's absolutely no gain here. So, no, that's definitely not something we are interested in. It's quite the opposite. We want to help because if we can help the government to be working. Because otherwise, very often we get blamed. Oh, that damn thing is not working, but actually it's not the machine. Okay. And remanufacturing. Again, remanufacturing we need to clarify. I asked this question to the current director of the FDA's Office for Medical Devices and Radiological Health. Sir, if you accuse me of not obeying the Constitution of the United States, which is the most highest law set of laws we have in the United States, but you don't allow me to read the Constitution, how do you expect me to know whether I'm violating or not the Constitution? If you don't get the specifications, the service limitations from the manufacturers, how do you know whether you are doing the so-called remanufacturing or not? Remanufacturing is defined as changes significantly to the device specifications or intended use. So if you don't have the specifications, my friend, I'm not sure how you can know whether you changed or not. Okay. Did you adjust the calibration to be out of calibration certain device, but you don't have the range of calibration? So let's be real. We need access to some information reasonably. to do that, okay, as I mentioned to you before and showed you before, this has been required by the European Union 30 years ago, and also to some extent for the lasers in the United States food, and also the so-called AIAT for X-ray systems. So why don't we have some uniform set of rules for this kind of things? Okay, I doubt very much anyone, unless somebody is really, really crazy or dumb, okay, or both, wants to significantly change the device specifications for no good reason. Okay. All right. So, bottom line, unfortunately, I believe this is all about money. It's really not so much about safety of the patients. Okay. And this is a long and arduous work. We really hope that we don't need to get the Congress to institute a law, but if that is the case, we will do that. But like what the manufacturers of automobiles signed a memorandum of understanding with the repair organization, we would like to see a common sense memorandum of understanding to say, hey, let's come to terms here to what we can achieve together and then do the right things. But we really need to get you into this battle, like former Congressman John Lewis said, get in trouble, get in good trouble, necessary trouble, and help everyone. Because this is, again, for the people, for yourselves, for your families, for your loved ones, for your friends. This is not about money. Come on, guys, okay? So, your last word.
All right, now for the technical. This, that, and the other thing. All right. I just want to tell you a little bit about this, what happened in California when we ran a campaign to try to get medical right to repair passed in California. I mean, Senator Susan Eggman, who's recently just championed the successful consumer right to repair bill, came to us and said, listen, I only want to work, it was like 2021, I only want to work on things that will help my state in the pandemic. I don't want any other bills. And so we started talking about, well, we could do medical right to repair. And it really started because there were a couple leaders in different California hospitals who were getting outspoken. They've had experiences where they thought that the restrictions on servicing of products put people's lives at risk, and it kind of gotten them pretty upset. And so they started working with us as volunteers, and we sat down, just looking at the politics, I said, okay, you have ISOs on one side, manufacturers on the other, let's compare the market cap, right? Let's just think about this. 100 to 1, the size, maybe not totally, but like something like that, like at least 20 to 1 manufacturers to ISOs in terms of just size of those businesses. So if you're a lawmaker and some independent company says, I want you to make it easier to compete with opponents that are 20 times my size, lawmakers are going to be like, you know. But the hospital is coming in and telling you that this is dangerous and we're worried about this. It's a totally different conversation. And it's critical that we engage outside of just the ISOs as we continue to build this case, right? And so we started organizing from the bottom, and we just started getting hospitals to talk to each other. And eventually we worked up until we had all these different healthcare systems, and they were able to convince the California Hospital Association to put their clout behind our bill. And that was, like, I would say, a really significant thing. And one of the ways that I noticed the success of this effort was that you can look this up yourself. If you want to go, and I didn't pull the NEMA records, for MIDA, but you know, these, like, $3 million was spent in like 6 months lobbying on this. It's hard to tell exactly in California the way they split it up, but you could go look up SB 605 lobbying records and you can see Hologic and GE and Varian and Medtronic, and you can just see with the money that they're spending to stop this bill. So we kind of dragged them all out of the woodwork because we were able to get some momentum. We passed 2 committees without an opposing vote, and they had to put in a bunch of money to stop us. I feel like if we had that in 10 states, you know, there's only so many, you know, kind of air raid lobby wars you can run in 1 year. And this is basically how we defeated Apple and John Deere. You know, you get a little sense, but Binseng went over this, like, you know, their message is essentially right to repair endangers patients, right? So I think that's the conversation we need to have. Does it? And what does not having right to repair mean for patients? I just wanted to, you know, here's a new project. This is some kind of, you know, phony think tanky kind of group of hacks, and they have this new safe repair project where they, it's like an all-state commercial basically, but you know, against common sense. And you know, here's a little bit. I just wanted to like show you a sample slide from their messaging. I mean, they're just saying that, you know, medical device repair in hospitals is not regulated, which is just, as you know, just like a very convenient splicing of the facts to not talk about the Joint Commission or CMS or anything else, and to try to create the sense that there's a huge problem. Every lawmaker at this point has like, yeah, but what about like the duct tape? Because apparently, you know, there used to be a thing that they would go in and they had a picture of like a machine with duct tape on it, and they're like, this is what ISOs are doing out there in the world. And you know, I'm totally serious. If you don't believe me, I mean, listen, I was just told by a member of Congress the other day that, you know, Evamed came in with like a piece of equipment and that they said an ISO fix, and look at it's terrible. And, you know, they've no, I don't know what the evidence is for that, and I don't know that it's not true, but like, I'm sure all of you could take the OEMs that came in and totally screwed something up, take a picture of it and get it to your member of Congress, because they need to know that this is, you know, they're trying to invent this narrative that ISOs are just like, you know, monster garaging medical devices, and nobody's telling them the other side that, you know, hospitals are not too stupid to decide between a good servicer and a bad servicer. That's their motivation. They have data. They say, listen, I was talking to a hospital person at another conference, and they had data. They looked at all their endoscopes, and they said, the ISO we're using is 1/5 the cost and has twice the success rate. This equipment stays in use longer. It has fewer fails. And so they finally got to the C-suite, and the vendor came in and said, why aren't you using OEM contracts? You're going to hurt patients. And he said, this is what the data says. We shouldn't even be having this conversation until you drop your price by 80%, and then maybe we'll talk. But you're lower quality and higher cost. So why would we want to force hospitals to pay more for worse quality healthcare? They should be able to choose the best servicer with their information, and we should not stop them from doing that. You know, I had one OEM person tell me in a private conversation, you know, it's like, hey, this is just business. This is just business. Like, you know, we make money on these service contracts. Yeah, we kind of make it hard for people to do. It's like, it's bad business. Okay, there's a lot of bad business out there. You don't have to be into bad business to make a living in this country. You know, thankfully, you can do a good job and be a good citizen, and you can have a good life. And we should all just expect that from each other. This is a little bit of my alter call here, apparently. I'm fired up a little bit. I wanted to talk a little bit about ways to help. So one is that we know that the way forward is probably going to be some collaboration between the OEMs who we need. Like we're not having devices without them, with the HDOs, with the ISOs, and with people like me, with just interested, you know, basically patients. And so we created our, you know, out of that 2018 FDA report, which created the medical device servicing community. We recently launched a website up there. And this is an attempt to just kind of have everyone together, having a conversation collaboratively. I believe that, you know, we want a common sense solution. I just don't think that you can have a common sense solution without having right to repair. I have no financial, I don't get paid by, fixing medical devices in competition with anybody. I just think the world would be better if we had a more competitive market for the servicing of medical devices. I think it's better for the planet. I think it's better for every industry, and medical devices is just one. And so the other thing is that we do have this we are trying to build this list of people who are working with biomeds and people who work actually on equipment, because it's very important to us to actually get facts from people. Like, we want data. I don't want to just, well, I hear the talking points from Binseng, and then I hear the talking points from the other side, and I have to decide. Like, I actually want to talk to the people doing the work, and that's how we've gotten to the point where I feel pretty confident when I say that this is the right thing to do. Is I feel like I've done the requisite conversations, but I'm always learning more. And the other thing that I think, just going back to the California example, we have to get the HDOs to weigh in. Like, if it's just one company competing with another company and they're both fighting over the thing, I think it ends at a draw. If the manufacturers don't outright win, which they probably would. Maybe I don't think it ends in a draw. I think we lose. But if the hospitals are saying, no, we need the ability to choose ISOs in certain situations because that's the best thing for our patients and our hospital system, and we can't foreclose that competition because that'll be bad, I think that kind of draws us to some place where we can move forward, we can resolve this issue, and you guys can get on to all the other cool topics you could be discussing here at MD Expo, and right to repair can be one of the past. So that's my pitch. And questions?
Comments?
In order to make manufacturers on this Tesla, you can, get their software for arm and a leg for 24 hours. They give you the right to repair, but the cost is outrageous. What about stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have a name for that, which we call hostile compliance. So, yes.
You mean hostage or hostile?
Well, it's hostage taking right now. So I was having a conversation with someone before about John Deere. It's like there's a special software tool, and you can buy it from John Deere, and it's quite expensive. It's probably not prohibitively expensive for a large farm operation, but it's incomplete. It's like kind of like the Philips, MRI levels where you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you think you're getting access to do repairs, but really they're giving you a much lower level of access, and you can't actually do the repairs you need. So there's all kinds of gamesmanship, which is why I think we just need to set the expectation. If it's a material required to do the repair, it needs to be available on fair and reasonable terms. That's the core of the legislation that we've passed for these other types of equipment. So there is fair and reasonable terms language, and that generally means terms equivalent to what their own people would get. So if they, and this is another problem in the car world, like where the MOU and cars is having troubles because they didn't have some of these fair and reasonable terms quite tight enough, and so some companies, BMW is another one people bring up a lot, charges you a ridiculous amount of money to get access to the information you need.
CMMS provider, and I would believe that any of us in that business could go a long way to providing you the data that would help the cost, right? But what specific data would be beneficial? I mean, things like uptime, mean time between failure, response time.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I want lawmakers to see that I've learned from talking to HDOs is like how carefully they pick the different service contracts and their vendors, right? They're not just like, oh, a guy showed up door-to-door MRI repairman, and so we hired this ISO. Like, they know exactly what they're getting into. They're very careful about it. There are certain modalities, right, that they're going all OEM. So I think the thing that I want to see is like, the data of like where you can see, especially in the same modality, like the same piece of equipment, here's the service that we get from the OEMs, like this is what the uptime rates are, this is the, and then this is the service from the ISOs, and to just realize that hospitals are making these determinations. And there's some places where they're like, oh my gosh, the OEM's a million times better. This is a great value contract. And so they buy it. That's the way it's supposed to be, right? Why are we hamstringing the hospitals to force them to pay more for the same service or pay more for a lesser? It's like it should just be the best thing wins. And I think that's the data that I'm trying to figure out how to present to lawmakers so they can say, oh, actually, if hospitals are empowered to make these choices, everything just gets better and maybe better and cheaper. And I think that that's a win for everybody, especially the public who's struggling to pay these bills.
One of the things that I noted at a recent user conference is that you collect that data yourself. Don't rely on the reports that you're getting from the OEM for those contracts that you're paying for as far as, uptime. Collect that information yourself, have the calls come through you, and then track that actual response time and uptime yourself. I think what you'll find is it's pretty shocking.
Yes, I have operated an ISO for 40 years. One of the reasons why we're successful is because we know that we are providing a service better than the manufacturer. I encourage our customers over the years to make sure when they purchase equipment that all of the service manuals and all of the software to do the service is included in the purchase price. We have had to use that by going back and saying, look, you paid for something you didn't get. You put it in your purchase order, and they go and get it. So, but when you said earlier, as an independent service organization, we don't want to fail. We don't want to put the buck, don't take on the equipment. We want to shine. We want to make sure that the customer has faith in us to go and take care of their equipment. 25 years I worked at the hospital. I knew where we were missing. The manufacturers, once they sold it, they were gone. A lot of times that's what happened back in the 1970s and 80s. They sold it to you and then they were gone. So I learned from my experience in the hospital what their needs were. And we've been pretty good at it. So just going to pass that along.
Sort of like a comment, I submit FDA medicine reports. Maybe your organization would create a template for sites saying, hey, when you're going to submit a report, maybe have a verbiage of the history of who touched it, who repaired it, limitations on parts. You can sneak that into the FDA. Some of those reports become public, and you wear your lawmaker and say, hey, look, we have
No, that's a good idea, yeah.
issues with repair.
Yeah, unfortunately, FDA said in its 2018 report that it was not able to read all those comments and synthesize because they did not put into specific fields that can be sorted and organized. So FDA at the end of the day say, hey, well, we saw a few patient deaths here, patient injuries here, and then we try to look whether it's OEM or it's ISO. That kind of report did not really help anyone. But the only more deeper, extensive investigation of the report was done by ECRI, and they literally sift through tens of thousands of reports and find things, but their conclusion was very clear. The same as the FDA concluded is that there's no evidence of significant level problems. Other comments, questions? We are past.
All right.
So thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
attending.